Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the
Good evening.
Glitch Hikers.
Top
We
story
gotta
tonight. Travel delays. We have
yes.
similar
So
reports coming in from
last
all
time,
of
if you
our
remember,
affiliate
we were
stations.
interrupted by me
Everything has come
getting
to a
stuck,
standstill.
which was fairly impressive.
So settle in for what appears
Do these
to be
people
a
disappear?
very
They
long
do.
night. Wherever you
I
are.
don't know if this counts as the
Your
second
news team
time
will
since
be
I
hard
had
at
to
work obsessively
force
covering
quit
the story from all
last
angles.
time,
But if I may offer
because the
some
first time was
advice,
supposed to have a predetermined
distant
end.
replays will not rescue you from an ongoing crisis.
This time we're not
No
going
use
to mess around with the speed
regrets
boosts, at least not this
or
particular
fuming
time. I'm
about
going to
what could have
experiment
been.
more with those
Whatever happens,
in my
we'll be
free
here
time.
throughout the night to keep you company. But first, a word from our sponsors.
The airport with sponsors. That's probably more true to real life than most people would be comfortable with. It's just that airports don't necessarily come out and say so right off the top. Use speed boosts to get over to wherever this is. We are not going to jump unless we need to. Okay, so up there is where they want me to go. For some reason. Oh, here we go. Up one more.
With that weather front holding steady, the forecast shows no sign of change. But that doesn't mean that change isn't possible. Change is inevitable, and change can come from within. Look at where you are with fresh eyes. If uncomfortable or undesired thoughts arise to cloud your way, that's okay. Though they may loom large, just bring your attention gently back to this moment. The sounds you hear, the sights you see, the movements that you make. Let go of frustration or fear, and allow thoughts to come and go, as all weather must.
Basically meditation. That's basically how proper meditation is done. See, there's a lot of people who talk about meditation incorrectly, and I meditate. I actually looked into it. I've talked to a couple of people who really actually meditate. Meditation is not trying to achieve this deep sense of peace or anything like that. That's not what it's really about. Alright, meditation is simply sitting there quietly and letting your thoughts kind of pass through your brain. And you just grab a thought and look at it, contemplate it for a little while, and when you're done contemplating it, you push it back out into the stream. It's kind of like, think of meditation kind of like you sitting on a riverbank, right? And your thoughts are leaves on the surface of the river. And if you see a particularly interesting leaf, you can just reach in, scoop it up, and look at it in your hands. When you're done with it, you put it back in the water. Off it goes. That's what meditation is supposed to be. Alright? It's not about trying to calm and quiet all your thoughts. That's not really what it's about. You're supposed to be able to attain inner peace by understanding yourself better, by achieving self-understanding, both the good and the bad of you. Because we all have good and bad within us, right?
You can achieve your goals by letting go. To illustrate this phenomenon, we turn to another story in the Zhuangzi. The sage's text describes an enlightened chef of great skill, Cook Ting, preparing ingredients in a dazzling display of speed and precision. As soon as the performance is finished, what was once singular and whole falls into an assortment of perfect pieces. When asked how their skill could reach such heights, Cook Ting replied, "What I care about is the way, which goes beyond skill. When I first began to use my knife, all I could see was the object I was cutting. After 3 years, I no longer saw the whole, and instead saw the pieces. But now I go with the way, and I don't see with my eyes. Perception, judging, and understanding stop, and spirit moves me where it wants. I guide the knife through the openings and trace the structures as they are, instead of focusing on how they could be. Great changes do not always require great effort, and breakthroughs are not always the result of blunt force. Trace the possibility space as it is, to find your way forward.
Alright, something else I also noticed is that these shapes seem to point a specific way. If I were to go through one, it disappears. But I've noticed they're all over the place. There's even some way up there. I'll have to explore this a bit more thoroughly later on. Again, I don't intend to do so now because I want to get through the narrative of the airport, so to speak. I need to go up. So I'm not going to do that in this particular incident. But I am going to want to do that at some point to see if there's some kind of ultimate... they're also grabbing more colors. Oh, it's a time-limited thing. I see. And then I grab another one and they all get more colors again within a specific amount of time. Theoretically speaking. Yeah, that's what it is. Okay, well, we don't want to get stuck, so we're going to leave this be. But I need to get up. Here we go. So we'll do that at a later time. Oh, that was a mistake. Wait, can we actually get up there from over here? I can't tell. Can we jump over this? Yes, okay. And can we climb up this? To an extent. Alright. That is clearly not the way we need to be going. The better question is, how the hell do we get up there? I suspect we'll have to use an arrow to get over there. Did not expect platforming today. Can we... Oh, okay. Hold on. Oh, wait, I goofed that. I needed to hit that correctly, and I did not. We can use this one. Or we can just do this. Just realized this path goes up there. Yeah, didn't see this before. Whoops. Goes to show how much I'm paying attention. Oh, this is nice. Oh, hello. There's so much space here when no one's around. Stuck here too, eh? A journey aborted. Yet here we're left in its own kind of liminality. Where were you headed? That's right, I have to hold down. You know, I'm not sure. Maybe I was just headed here. A different kind of space then. A differently structured kind of journey. The structures we move through can change so much of how we experience a movement. Sometimes we move through structures and it doesn't even feel like we're the ones moving. Conversations can move ideas forward, or propel us to new actions. Of course, how we structure conversation also changes how we interact with it, and thus how we experience it. A natural flow of conversation from point A to point B, or a meandering wheel of dialogue. Yes, because sometimes a straightforward conversation has its purposes, but so does a meandering one, right? In conversations like this, the conversations that are had in Glitch Hikers, I think are purposefully meandering. Because they're supposed to explore ideas, thoughts, philosophies, perspectives. That is the intention. The game wouldn't work with a natural flow from point A to point B, but for more narrative structures, a lot of that is going to be flows of point A to point B. There might be some meandering on occasion if the book is trying to make some kind of point, but most books, whether they be educational or fiction or anywhere in between, are going to have that point A to point B. Most business conversations will also have that, right? Whereas more casual conversations will tend to take on a more meandering type. I got stuck like this once as a kid, lost in a store that had closed. Going back to actually really quickly the conversations again, really quick, this is why when people have very meandering ways of talking where they deviate from the point, they're generally regarded as chatty, friendly a lot of times, social, but whenever someone has more of a direct conversational style where they just state the point and that's it, they tend to be terse, businesslike, short, antisocial, right? How direct your conversation is does affect how people tend to see you, right? Lost in a store that had closed. See, what she was talking about was conversation structure, but we can also talk about story structure as well, which is somewhat related. But she switched back to stores, so I can either continue on with the conversation about being stuck in places and go with the airport, or I can continue the conversation from before more directly with the conversation structure, or I can meander into stories have structure too. I'm going to go with stories have structure too because I do want to meander. That's kind of, again, the point here. And secondarily, it's tangentially related to both the statement she just said and this conversation we had before. She is about to impart a story which has its structure, the story of how she got lost in a store that had closed. So I'm going to go with the stories have structures too. Of course they do. Take any screenwriting class and that's pounded into your brain pretty quick. Rules to follow if you want to do it right. But there is no right. There's just the kind of story you want to tell. And how you tell a story affects everything about it. A hero's journey, or just a slice of life. What do you want to impart to your audience? Hope? Catharsis? An important message? Or just get them to think? 3-act, 5-act, Kishoten Ketsu, or a simple vignette? Kishoten Ketsu? I know this is Japanese, I just don't quite remember the context. It's a type of story. Introduction, development, twist, resolution. My parents left me alone in a store when it closed. As I wandered the empty aisles, the toys came alive and taunted me, but other toys helped me find my voice. Only my silence had left me powerless. Through communication, we were able to coexist for a time. Now we've looped back around. True meandering. Conversation structure? What do you mean, conversation structure? Although I know what she means. Well, look at any game you've played. Does dialogue flow boldly forward without looking back? Or do you return again and again to ask a series of questions, get the exposition you need? This is actually an interesting question. I've been playing through the Dark Souls series again, and they very much have this second version of dialogue, of conversation structure, of basically narrative structure, as it's professionally called, where the plot and the background information of most of the series is not directly stated to you. And each time you replay the game, you're noticing something new each time. There are entire YouTube channels dedicated to the lore and the background information of the Soulsborne series, particularly Elden Ring, which, in my opinion, is the best example of this because it's been more perfected from the previous ones, although Dark Souls 3 also is excellent at this, as is Bloodborne. But Dark Souls 1 and 2, as well as Demon's Souls, are a bit more lackluster because they were still trying to figure out the formula, right? To the point where you could say that Demon's Souls' narrative is somewhat bare bones, right? But most games do have a dialogue flowing boldly forward. An interesting mix of this, in my opinion, is the Final Fantasy series, particularly towards the, back half of the series. I would even say from, Final Fantasy, I would say 5 or 6 onwards, where they have a straightforward narrative that's going on, but there's also side things going on that either add to that mainline narrative or give you more context for what's going on in the world in general, right? It's the same in real life, which is also true. Does something you say create a whole new branch of conversation? Do you ever get back to the original point, or is the tangent the new conversation, just like we had earlier with this very conversation? Conversation is the structure in which we interact with one another, which is primarily true. Is it formal, friendly, boiling over with in-jokes or references? Will the animals in aisle 4 ever stop gossiping? You know, this is my favorite bar in the terminal. Conversations do loop, so that's not even an option for me. I don't like talking to people. See, this is an interesting statement for me because I'm somewhat torn between these two. I like talking to people like this, where it's very philosophical, where it's very, conversational, where there is no argument or point to be proven. I also like conversations that are very direct and to the point. This is my business background speaking. But a lot of people, for some bizarre reason, have this weird tendency to want to argue. They want to be right about something. It starts off as a totally normal, meandering conversation about whatever, and then something gets brought up where an opinion must be provided. And then at that point, it becomes, in a lot of cases, unless the person is mature, it becomes an argument. When you don't want it to be. You can have different opinions from other people. Something that a lot of people struggle with, especially since they do a lot of their communicating online and feel really self-justified and really can only see themselves because they can't physically see the other person. This happens more often online than in real life, though. When in real life, people will tend to be willing to at least accept that you have other opinions, but online this is different. I recently got into a conversation on TikTok, actually, where, it was the video clip of the guy in that movie, I can't remember the movie, where he was talking about how America isn't the only country with freedom, and America, isn't actually that great compared to all of the rhetoric that depicts America as star-spangled awesome, as his quote is. In the comment section of that video, I mentioned that I said America lost its hope in 1949, which is when lobbying was legalized. And somebody extrapolated that out to believing that I was saying America was great before 1949, which I didn't say that, which I pointed out a little while into this argument, even though they were arguing on a non-existent statement that I made. I never had said America was great. I simply said America lost its hope at that time, which is different. It's a totally different conversation. As soon as I pointed this out, the argument died. But that's an example of what I'm talking about, where people have a tendency to see an opinion, and if they disagree with it, they have to prove themselves right. They were trying to prove America wasn't great. They really went into race as their big example. But again, that wasn't the point I was trying to state in my original statement. Right? But that's a prime example here. Overall, I would say I like talking to people. You're in luck. That's all we've got here. Well, that and loitering. People can be fascinating, bringing all new perspectives to how you move through your own life, all new stories. This is what I like about people. The issue is that people try to dominate your story. They try to overwrite chapters of your life or viewpoints that you have to fit their narrative, their perspective, their belief system, whatever that happens to be. Right? And that's what bothers me. And a lot of people do that, especially online. I wandered around that store for an hour thinking my parents had left me on purpose. This airport is strange. This airport is a strange structure. I think all airports are. Such a massive structure with such specific utility, yet turned into architectural art. A display of strength and commerce. They do their best to make a certain kind of person feel welcome, comfortable, at ease. All the while you're stuck here for hours, scrutinized from top to bottom, inside and out, and constantly warned about unattended baggage. True. And they're a kind of purgatory. What time is it? What time is your flight? It doesn't matter. Time is meaningless here. Grab a drink at the bar. When I'm older, I think I'll probably prepare myself for the end by just spending a lot of time at my local airport. I've never considered an airport to be a form of purgatory, but it's a comparison that makes a lot of sense. At least if you're more familiar with purgatory. If you're not of a Christian background, you may not be as familiar with how purgatory is supposed to be described, but I've heard it also be accurately described as a sort of waiting room, right? But I think this is a little bit of a better comparison. What time is it? What time is your flight, right? It's not a stage. I think it's beautiful. The structure is beautiful. I think airports are beautiful in that way. With that comparison. A building this size, of this complexity, is a natural canvas for the art of architecture. But all buildings are art in their own way. Very true. And art can affect us profoundly. Made friends with the whole toy section, though. Company helps us pass the time. Maybe learn something about ourselves. I have to move on at this point. I've covered everything else. What are you doing here? Thinking about stories, as always. Thinking about these conversations. Hoping you get something out of it, you know? As storytellers, we always hope someone gets something out of it. As storytellers, we create the fixtures and foundations on which will stand the key learnings of the next generation. Like builders, we toil to render, as if concrete, the most desperate truths we have uncovered. We structure our stories, and thus we structure our culture, our future. What are you doing here? What am I doing here? Sitting with my thoughts. I think at this point, mindfulness. This space is good for that. Let your thoughts ping off of whatever you find. But what are you really doing here? That's what I'm really doing here. Well, no, I guess I'll say looking for something. I want to see what the meaning here is. There's lots to find in this space, in this headspace. Leave yourself open to whatever you encounter. But what are you really doing here? I don't know. That's okay. Then leave yourself open to whatever you might find. But what are you really doing here? That's what I'm really doing here. Okay. It's worth thinking about. It's worth being mindful of. We can only set up the structures. You have to go on the journey. Follow the voices if you want to see this one through. But be sure to come back sometime to catch your flight. What do you mean? I don't know. I guess you'll see. Let yourself wander in the meantime. There's lots to find. I never did find my way out of that store.
What are the structures around you? How do they shape this space? How do they shape how you feel, how you behave? Which way will you go now? This space beckons you onward. Turning back or retreading old ground will only prolong the inevitable. But we do not move constantly.
That's an interesting point as well. There was a movie I watched relatively recently in which a guy, that's not the main point of the film, but a guy who was an architect by profession, he collected rooms that he felt the structure of had contributed to the murders that happened in them. So all these rooms that he recreated in his...
Explore the empty spaces. Trust your intuition and journey onward. But as you survey the potential paths before you, allow some of these spaces to remain empty. Accept that there will always be paths not taken. Our journeys must pause at times.
Anyways, before I actually, because I wasn't expecting to trigger right there, I thought it was going to move me towards somewhere else. But before I hit this next one, anyways, the point was that he believed that the architecture, the structure of these rooms was what contributed to the fact that a murder had taken place in those rooms. So he recreated these. Do you say something every time I stand still? My goodness. Oh, is my flight ready?
Only once you are aware of the structures surrounding you can you choose how to move through them, or whether to break free altogether. But stillness and presence of mind do not require
I'm going the wrong way.
stillness of body.
I'm not sure how this makes me feel.
Cook Ting finished by saying, "Whenever I come to a complicated place, I size up the difficulties, tell myself to be patient and observant, keep focused on the present moment. I do not worry about time. and move with the greatest subtlety until, all at once, the whole thing comes apart, and I stand there holding the knife, turning to face each direction, completely satisfied.
I have dreams like this. I really do. They don't have structures. I just fall. Yes. Yes, they do. Has to be a key. It can't be a mouse click, which is what I've been clicking the whole time. Apparently it had to be. Well, that was the airport part 2. I'll probably return there at some future point in time. But yeah, that was interesting. That was an interesting little jaunt. But with that being said, thank you very much for joining me. If you liked this, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, please ignore me. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions, or requests, please leave them down in the conversation in the comment section below. And have a great 24 hours.